Vale across southern Scotland, parts of northern England into the Midlands. Some showery rain at first here, and then more widely, sunny spells and showers will affect the southern half of the UK as well as Northern Ireland and western Scotland by the afternoon. A warmer day to come though in the south, 22 Celsius possible, where we get some of those sunny spells, but by the end of the afternoon, further showers are pushing into the far southwest, reaching Northern Ireland as well as parts of Wales during the evening. Clear spells continue towards the east, and then a mixed end to the week. It's going to be showery on Wednesday, and it's going to be increasingly windy on Thursday and Friday.
On radio, they call it the drive time slot, 4 p.m. until 6 p.m. as listeners head home. It's that part of the schedule when the dust of the day's events begin to clarify, and we try to make sense of it for you. Brazier is drive time for radio and TV. It's fast, it's punchy, it's opinionated, there's a Brazier angle and a little bit of levity.
That's the question. That's two questions, actually.
That's Brazier, Monday to Thursday, 4 till 6 on GB News.
We are GB News.
We're right across this great nation.
On TV,
on radio, on digital.
Absolutely everywhere.
We don't talk down to you.
We embrace all voices.
with honest and civilised conversation.
We're not part of the establishment.
We're one of you.
And we're only getting started.
Join us on GB News,
the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
Every morning from 6 o'clock, we'll wake you up with GB News Breakfast with all the stories you didn't know from the night before.
So whether it's serious news, entertainment, or your own views from all over our great nation, we're here to kick off your day with a smile.
The national media should be reflecting and reporting what's happening here.
You will notice the northwestern accents.
Whether you're with us on TV, radio, or online, every morning, it's breakfast from 6 a.m. Hope you can join us.
Join us for Ministry of Offence, the comedy panel show that's just like the news, in that the left fights the right and it doesn't really seem to matter who wins. We cover the big stories. It was in fact a troop of baboons and not angry vegans.
I like that.
And the really important stories.
Fat naked cow gets stuck in swimming pool.
It's a headline in a lot of local newspapers. Yeah.
We're on the same team, Nick. Yeah, but I'm just helping you.
Join us for Ministry of Offence, Saturday nights, 8 o'clock on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Hello and welcome to the briefing with me, Gloria De Piero. The Platinum celebrations are over and Conservative MPs return from recess to vote on whether to keep Boris Johnson as Prime Minister.
I'll be joining Gloria for the next 2 hours and we'll be talking with Nigel Mills MP. He's one of the Tory MPs who sent a letter to Graham Brady calling for Prime Minister Boris Johnson to go.
We'll speak to Kevin... oh my gosh, I've forgotten his name. Kevin Schofield, the Whitehall, the political editor of the Huffington Post. We've also got the polling expert, David Cowling, too.
So stay with us here on Gloria and Liam for the briefing.
Good afternoon, it's 12 o'clock. I'm Tamsin Roberts in the GB newsroom. The Prime Minister's anti-corruption czar, John Penrose, has resigned and says Boris Johnson should follow suit. After Partygate and weeks of speculation, the Prime Minister will face a vote of confidence this evening. Dozens of MPs have declared their support for Boris Johnson, but the former Foreign Secretary, Jeremy Hunt, has said the Prime Minister must go.
Broken the ministerial code and in a serious and material way, and that is historically, traditionally and rightly a resignation matter for him, and it has to be a resignation matter for me too. integrity, honesty, leadership. Those are not technicalities. Those are absolutely non-negotiable things. And actually the Prime Minister says so in his own reply. He says these are absolutely essential as the way we do business in our democracy.
Well, Work and Pensions Secretary Therese Coffey told GB News the Prime Minister has her vote.
No, I'm fully supporting the Prime Minister. It's Boris who got the highest share of the vote in 2019 since 1979. Got the 80-seat majority, and it's that manifesto and that leadership which got us that majority. Of course, COVID has somewhat derailed things, but even on that, I'd say to you he got the big calls right, and that's why I will certainly be supporting him today and encourage my colleagues to do so.
Tory MP Andrew Bridgen says Boris Johnson can't be both a rule maker and a rule breaker.
Oh, I think he has got the big calls right with the help of the parliamentary party. But, I mean, that doesn't excuse the fact that he's overseen a culture of disregard for his own COVID rules in Number 10. Old adage was if you're on the front page of the papers for 6 or 7 days in a row you had to resign. This is going to be 10 months, and it's completely distracting from the government's day-to-day business.
To other news now. The UK is sending its first long-range missiles to Ukraine after Russia hit the country's capital. The Ministry of Defence says air-launched cruise missiles struck rail infrastructure in Kiev for the first time since April. The precision-guided rockets being sent to Ukraine have a range of 50 miles, with the Prime Minister saying the UK can't stand by as Russia flattens cities and kills innocent civilians. Former Director of Special Forces Major General Jonathan Shaw told GB News the UK has to supply the weapons.
I think the West needs to take suitable actions to respond to any future strike, and they'll have thought that through. They'll have planned responses if Russia responds in other ways, but then carry on with their plans. We cannot allow ourselves to be intimidated or sort of outfaced by Russian rhetoric.
Thousands of British travellers have been left stranded following flight cancellations across Europe. Passengers booked with British Airways, TUI, Wizz Air and EasyJet are affected as airlines continue to struggle with severe staff shortages. Transport Secretary Grant Shapps says the government will work with the industry to avoid further transport chaos. Travel correspondent Simon Calder told GB News automatic refunds for passengers aren't good enough.
Interesting that Grant Shapps, the Transport Secretary, happened upon the idea of, oh, well, we'll make sure people get automatic refunds. They don't want refunds. They want to be flown home. Getting their money back is the least of their concerns. They just want to be on a plane. And I think what we will see this week is actually a number of airlines, starting with EasyJet, saying, yeah, we can't fly the summer that we promised. Therefore, we are actually going to be cutting back maybe 10 or 15%.
A British man has been sentenced to 15 years in prison in Iraq after being charged with attempting to smuggle artefacts out of the country. Jim Fitton, a 66-year-old retired geologist, was arrested in March at Baghdad International Airport, carrying small fragments of ancient pottery. His lawyer says he'll appeal the verdict on the grounds that he had no criminal intent. A German man arrested at the same time was acquitted of the same charges. A High Court judge will decide if doctors should continue to provide life-saving treatment to a 12-year-old boy. Archie Battersby from Southend in Essex hasn't regained consciousness since suffering brain damage in an incident at home in April. Doctors at the Royal London Hospital say it's highly likely Archie has died and life support treatment should end. Archie's parents disagree and want treatment to continue. Well, that's all from me for now. I'll have more in half an hour. This is GB News. We'll bring you more news as it happens, of course. Now, though, it's back to the briefing with Gloria and Liam.
And this is a special edition of the briefing with Gloria De Piero and me, Liam Halligan, because Prime Minister Boris Johnson will face a vote of no confidence today between 6 and 8 p.m.
The chair of the 1922 committee, Sir Graham Brody, announced that the threshold had been reached for a vote this morning. Let's have a look.
The threshold of 15% of the parliamentary party seeking a vote of confidence in the Prime Minister has been passed. Therefore, a vote of confidence will take place within the rules of the 1922 committee. That vote will take place this evening in the House of Commons between 6 and 8 o'clock, and we will announce the result shortly thereafter. There will be arrangements for proxy votes for any colleagues who can't be present in person in Westminster, and we'll notify colleagues of those arrangements in the near future.
Did you communicate the news directly to the Prime Minister? How did he react?
I'm not going to go into detail of that. I have followed the rules that we have in place. I notified the Prime Minister yesterday that the threshold had been reached, and we agreed the timetable for a confidence vote to take place, and he shared my view, which is also in line with the rules that we have in place, that that vote should happen as soon as could reasonably take place, and that would be today.
How many letters have you received?
I don't divulge that, but the threshold of 15% has been passed.
And when was the threshold passed?
It's slightly complicated because some colleagues had asked specifically that it should not be until the end of the Jubilee celebrations.
So did some of them post-date their letters so as not to interrupt the Jubilee?
I think that's not a bad description of what was taking place.
And that's when the threshold was breached?
Therefore, we reached the point where I could communicate with the Prime Minister yesterday, which I did, and as I said, he agreed with me that we should conduct the vote as quickly as we reasonably can. It's always an open invitation to the Prime Minister to come and speak to the committee, so if he wishes to, we will arrange that meeting this afternoon.
Have you put one in yourself, a letter?
I'm not going to answer that question, but I think technically it would be possible, but it would be a slightly odd thing to do.
That was Sir Graham Brady, chairman of the 1922 Committee of Tory Backbenchers, speaking to correspondents outside the House of Commons this morning. You might just have heard the birds cheeping there in the background. Well, joining myself and Gloria now is the Conservative MP, Nigel Mills. He submitted one of those letters of no confidence after the PM was issued with a fixed penalty notice for breaking COVID lockdown rules. Nigel Mills, what do you expect the outcome to be this evening?
Well, I suppose we don't know. We're still a few hours away. I mean, there's obviously clearly a very significant amount of concern. A large number of my colleagues have, I think, come to the view I came to a few weeks ago that we needed to make a change. But if you made me guess now, I think the Prime Minister will win the vote. He only has to win by one. So, finding 180 or so Conservative MPs who want to vote him out, I think, might be a stretch today. But who knows? We'll find out shortly after 8 o'clock.
Thanks for joining us. Just explain why you don't have confidence in your leader.
Well, the decision I came to back in April when he was fined for attending one of the gatherings in Downing Street was, here he was imposing rules on the whole country that we couldn't socialise, we couldn't go out, every pub was closed, shops were closed, people had to work from home unless they really couldn't. And then what we saw was social gatherings taking place inside the heart of government. I just don't think a large proportion of the public will ever forgive the fact that they were suffering, not seeing dying relatives, not being able to go and care for elderly relatives, not being able to go to funerals, all those things we all endured at a time when those rules were being sort of like repeatedly flouted in the very place that was making them. I just think there'll be a large chunk of the electorate that will never forgive that. I think it is unforgivable, in my view.
Isn't he still a winner? Mrs Thatcher famously lost by-elections in the middle of her various terms of office. You're from Amber Valley. That's an area close to where Gloria used to be an MP, an area we've examined here on GB News. The Tories actually did quite well in the recent local elections in Amber Valley. Well,
I suppose the first thing I'll say is I don't think we should judge every issue on a political calculation of how many votes are in this or that. I think there are, at some point, there is right and wrong, and I think what went on in number 10 was wrong, and it's not befitting of a Prime Minister who should be setting the highest standards for the country, not kind of like just scraping by with some of the lowest or something in that situation. If you want to do a political calculation, well, look at the opinion polls. They're not great for us. I mean, look at the Prime Minister's own poll ratings. They're not great either. And then I think the challenge for the party as a whole is there are parts of the electorate, perhaps our core vote through those years when we were really struggling are the people who are most annoyed with the Prime Minister over this issue. So I think there is a political calculation that no doubt some of my colleagues will be making as to whether actually the Prime Minister can still win and can recover from this issue. But I think we shouldn't lose sight of the fact there is a right and a wrong here as well.
Who is the leader to unite the party and win the next general election, in your view?
We haven't got a contest yet, let alone any declared candidates, so it's quite hard for me to know who I will back in that situation. I prefer to know who the runners are in a race before I choose where to put my money, I suppose. I was somebody who supported Boris Johnson 3 years ago. I think he has done many great things on Brexit, on getting us through the pandemic. So I'm not one who sort of all along has been wanting him to fail and find an excuse to get rid of him. I was hoping he would lead us through to the next election and win that well as well. So I've not been involved in behind the scenes plotting. I came to a view that unfortunately his behaviour and that of his team in Number 10 wasn't acceptable, and therefore I don't have confidence in him to continue in his role. If we get a vote, I'll then see who the candidates are.
Isn't there a danger, Nigel? I mean, no one would doubt, listening to you, your sincerity about this. You clearly think there's been some wrongdoing, in your view. But doesn't this look a little bit indulgent? There's a cost of living crisis. Obviously, there's the ongoing conflict in Ukraine. Doesn't it look a bit like the Conservative Party talking to itself?
I don't think, like previous leadership issues we've had, this isn't a matter of one of policy or different factions of the party wanting some kind of revenge or something. I think the Partygate concern has been hugely talked about in the country. I think all MPs have had hundreds and thousands of emails about it. It's been a non-stop story now for months. I don't think this is kind of like the Conservative Party being indulgent. I think we've been quite patient waiting for the outcome of police inquiries and the Sue Gray report. It's taken months on end to get to this position, and I think it's something that does need to be resolved. Either we'll know later on tonight whether this issue has caused a leadership change or whether the Prime Minister will carry on and lead us into the next election. I think that is the right thing to do. If we wait for an end to the Ukraine war before we make a change, that could be a very long time. Sadly, I don't think the cost of living crisis is going to be over in a few weeks either. So at some point, you have to you have to tackle these issues. The French just had a major presidential election during all these crises, so these things can be done. I don't think any of the key decisions would change on this. I think the government is united on the response to Ukraine. I think the opposition agree with us. I think the parliamentary party is there. I think the government have just announced a huge multi-million package of relief for the cost of living crisis. I'm not expecting any news or change on that in the coming weeks. So I think this is the right time to make this decision on stay or go. But whatever that decision is tonight, we have to get behind and respect it. That's how democratic processes work.
Get behind him. If the number of votes, if he wins tonight, is it all done and dusted? Because the briefing from Number 10 is this is over, the matter is closed. Because the danger is, of course, that you wound, but you don't finish him off, and he sort of stumbles on to the next general election. Will you get behind him?
The party rules are clear. He has to win by one, and then he stays. I think, Gloria, you and I well know that you can win elections by very narrow amounts, but that's the result, and then you have to get behind the result. And I think we expect that in all democratic processes, that the people who don't get the result they like then accept the democratic result. So yes, absolutely, if he wins, then I'll get behind him, and we all should. I think this issue would then be closed for the Conservative Party. I think we then need to convince the electorate that it's right to forgive him, but let's see what the results are later.
The party rules are clear, Nigel, but the party rules also say if you win a vote of no confidence from the 1922 committee, another vote can't be staged within a year, and yet senior people on the 1922 committee are already briefing that there could be another vote within a year. After Theresa May won her vote of no confidence, there was talk of another vote within the year. We can't rule that out, can we? And then Gloria's scenario of wounded but not finished off it's not as if this vote's going to be the end to it, is it?
Well, I hope it is going to be the end to it. I'm not sure I've ever seen those rules in writing. I'm not sure anybody ever has as to exactly what they say. So I'm not sure there is a one-year rule written in writing. But as I say, we aren't really talking about fundamental questions of policy and the direction of the Conservative Party. I think Brexit's a settled issue. We've got issues to settle with Northern Ireland, but there's no change there. I think we all agree with the levelling up agenda. We know we want to try and find a way through the cost of living crisis as best we can. I think this vote has come about because of the conduct of the Prime Minister and the people working around him during the pandemic. That issue can be settled tonight. Either we accept that conduct happened and we forgive it, or we don't and we change the leader. I don't think there'll be any real reason to revisit those questions. And I don't think we have the ideological divides that dragged on previous questions. I mean, the Theresa May situation was fundamentally that the parliamentary party didn't agree with her Brexit policy and she couldn't change her Brexit policy, and the parliamentary party weren't persuaded by it. So it was kind of like a completely stuck issue, and the country gradually lost confidence in her, resulting in getting a 9% vote in a nationwide election. I don't think we'll be in that situation here. These are issues that we either forgive and move on, or we don't, and we get that vote later on.
Nigel Mills, Conservative MP for Amber Valley. Thanks a lot for joining us here on GB News.
Well, the Prime Minister is due to address the 1922 committee. That's all Tory MPs. That's at 4 o'clock. But while many MPs and cabinet members are tweeting support, many are not. John Penrose has resigned as the Prime Minister's anti-corruption champion. Our national reporter, Paul Hawkins, is outside Downing Street. Paul.
Yeah, hi Gloria. Really interesting to hear you talking there with that Conservative MP and giving his reasons as Partygate for calling for the Prime Minister to go. But it's certainly not the only reason that a lot of Conservative MPs, or at least a significant number of Conservative MPs, have been calling for the Prime Minister to go. You mentioned there John Penrose MP. He has resigned as the corruption czar for the PM, saying that Boris Johnson, in his opinion, made a fundamental breach of the ministerial code. This was when this was in the exchange between him and his own ethics advisor, between Boris Johnson and his own ethics advisor, Lord Gate, last week, in which Lord Gate was effectively saying, OK, Prime Minister, you're saying you haven't broken the ministerial code when you've been fined by the Metropolitan Police, but you need to explain to the public why that is. And Boris Johnson was saying, look, I've said all I need to say. I haven't broken the ministerial code. There was no intent. I don't need to explain myself anymore. I've been fully accountable to the British public and to Parliament. But that wasn't enough for John Penrose MP. So he has resigned as the Prime Minister's anti-corruption czar. He will be voting against the Prime Minister in that crucial vote this evening. Also, Liam, you were talking about a potential changing of the rules over no-confidence votes. So if the Prime Minister wins this evening, of course, he gets a year's immunity from another no-confidence vote. But Andrew Bridgen this morning has warned that backbenchers may seek to change the rules for another no-confidence vote within the year, as they threatened Theresa May. And interestingly, he also says we have to be ruthless, otherwise we'll end up with a socialist in power. Andrew Bridgen there alluding to the fact that a lot of people are unhappy with Boris Johnson and Rishi Sunak raising taxes when the Conservatives are meant to be a tax-cutting party, and that is one of the reasons why Boris Johnson says that the party need to stick with him. He says that the taxes will be cut. They may not be at the moment, but they will be cut. We are going to do that. And we had that announcement from Rishi Sunak earlier in the year that as we get nearer the general election, there will be a cut in the rate of income tax. But at the moment, raising taxes, and the country is facing the highest tax threshold that it has since the Second World War. It's made a lot of Conservative MPs unhappy. And then we have as well, just looking at the other reasons for a vote of no confidence in the Prime Minister, Jesse Norman as well, scathing letter in which he does mention Partygate, but he also goes on to criticise the Rwanda immigration policy, calling it ugly. He says that Channel 4 doesn't need to be privatised, and he also mentions the high rate of taxation. So it's not just Partygate that a lot of Conservative MPs are unhappy about. It is also other matters with Boris Johnson, with policy, with a lack of long-term strategy and his overall leadership.
Paul, it's interesting, isn't it? Some pretty big beasts now. John Penrose, he won't be a household name, but people who follow politics closely, this guy was a Minister of State for Northern Ireland, junior Treasury Minister. This is a guy married to Dido Harding, who ran the government's test and trace scheme during the pandemic. And indeed, this morning we had Jesse Norman, another, next stop the cabinet for Jesse Norman, another Minister of State in the past. It strikes me that quite a lot of these figures, Tobias Ellwood, another one who's Defence Select Committee chair, they're more on the kind of Remain side of the party. Do you think that a lot of Tory MPs think that if we do have some kind of leadership change, that could reopen the Brexit issue?
Potentially, but what I would say is that counter to those names that you just reeled off, we've got Andrew Bridgen, staunch Brexiteer, really laying into the Prime Minister this morning, saying that the public are exasperated with Partygate. He also claims that there's been quite a lot of intimidation within the party to suppress those letters of no confidence in the Prime Minister going into Sir Graham Brady. He says the PM's negative poll rating is a drag on the ticket, and it's not normal for a Conservative PM to be booed outside St Paul's Cathedral. And then you've got Roger Gale as well, another very senior Conservative MP and staunch Brexiteer, again criticising the Prime Minister. In fact, his letter of no confidence in the PM has been into Sir Graham Brady for 18 months, and the reason behind that, he says, is nothing to do with Partygate, it's to do with Barnard Castle. So there are very staunch Brexiteers and previous loyalists of the Prime Minister now coming out to say, look, we need to get him out and we need to get someone else in. The question is, of course, who are they going to get in? And in fact, on that note, Roger Gale says that in his opinion, the party is spoilt for choice. There are some very good alternatives to the Prime Minister, and any single one of those people, in my view, would make a better Prime Minister than the one that we've got at the moment. He doesn't say who he's going for. Obviously, the front runners are people like Liz Truss, Rishi Sunak, people talking about Tom Tugendhat. You've also got Penny Mordaunt in the frame as well. He doesn't mention any names, but he does say that, you know, the party is spoilt for choice when it comes to alternatives to Boris Johnson, and it's not, and that, you know, maybe the electorate are done with him for now. We'll find out, of course, at the end of the month when we get those two big by-elections, and that's when the voters get to have their say after Conservative MPs this evening.
Thank you for that. What a scene behind him there with the bunting there from the Jubilee and then all this high politics going on.
Well, let's cross live now to another Conservative MP, Martin Vickers. Martin, hello, good to see you. Should he stay or should he go? Should he stay or should he go, Martin?
Shall we start what?
Should he stay or should he go?
He should stay.
Why?
I will be supporting the Prime Minister tonight.
Why?
Well, for the very simple reason, I think it's wrong that we're even having this vote of confidence. What we need is a government in place, a strong government, and this will inevitably weaken the authority of the Prime Minister. We've got an energy crisis, the whole cost of living issues. We've got to rebuild the NHS after the pandemic. We've got the situation in Ukraine. We don't need a government that is distracted by this vote, and in the unlikely event that Mr Johnson were to lose another 6 or 7 weeks where there's a vacuum at the heart of government, when government should be focusing on the massive challenges facing our country.
Martin, if he gets... You're saying he's going to win, he's going to get more than 180 of those Tories MPs votes. But unless it's a really decisive win, I mean, Theresa May won 63% of the Tory MP electorate when she faced her vote of no confidence, and she still limped on. She was still a wounded animal. Isn't that inevitable? The Prime Minister is going to be wounded.
Well, he's wounded by the very fact that they're having this vote. That's why I think my colleagues were wrong and misguided in their attempts to force a vote. But we are where we are. Yes, he will be weakened if... it's a statement of the obvious. The more votes there are against him, the weaker he will be. But I would hope that the numbers are modest and that we can then turn over and move on. Look, you know, what happened in Downing Street was irresponsible and reckless and totally unacceptable. But we've got to a situation now where, in effect, the Prime Minister has paid the penalty for that. He's paid the penalty by not just by being fined, but the constant attacks on him by the media, the public and so on. And I think now we've got to focus on the fact that we were elected on a manifesto. We were elected on a situation where a lot of those votes at the general election were for Boris Johnson personally. In a seat like mine that voted 70% for Brexit, he was the one person who galvanised support and delivered Brexit, thank goodness. We've now got to accept the fact that we've made a mistake. He's reshuffled the whole setup in Downing Street, which was, I will readily admit, a bit of a shambles. I know from personal experience that it's much more organised now. We've got people in place who are focused on delivering the objectives of the government. Let's get on with that and move on from this situation.
Martin Vickers, Conservative MP, very much defending the Prime Minister there. Thanks very much for your time.
Now, the Prime Minister will be facing a no-confidence vote tonight, but how does it work?
To take us through the ins and outs of how a no-confidence vote works, we're joined by Kevin Schofield, political editor of the Huffington Post. Hello, Kevin. What do you reckon?
Hello, Gloria. How are you?
Is he going to do it tonight, do you think?
I think probably, but it might be a little bit closer than many people expect. Certainly that's what I was told this morning by one front bencher. I spoke to another former cabinet minister who said that he will win it, but there'll be a large vote against him, which I think would maybe be the worst of all worlds, really, for the Conservative Party. So you're left with a badly wounded Prime Minister, and the whole world has been able to look into the size of the civil war and the opposition to him within his own party, which will be meat and drink for Keir Starmer and the other opposition parties going forward.
If we look back in history, Kevin, when John Major faced his vote of no confidence, you remember the back me or sack me, he put himself up for re-election from Tory MPs, didn't he, up against John Redwood. He won 66% of that 1922 Tory MP electorate. And as I just mentioned, Theresa May won 63%. In both cases, they were out within 2 years.
Yeah, and in Theresa May's case, she was out within 1 year, so it didn't go terribly well for her. So it can be a bit of a Pyrrhic victory, really, if you win, because it doesn't obviously guarantee that you'll go on and fight the next election, let alone win it. I saw Jacob Rees-Mogg earlier on saying that, even if he wins by one is enough. I mean, if it was to come to that, he would be as well resigning. Not that he will, of course. That is the last thing he will do. If he can cling on in any way, Boris Johnson will do so. However, if it is shown that there is substantial opposition, maybe less than a majority, but still a substantial opposition to him within his own party, I think that will be incredibly bad for him.
And are there trends amongst those who are calling for him to go? Are there patterns? Is there a certain type of Conservative MP who is the most likely to say, your time is done?
Not really. I mean, it's a very odd coalition. You've got Andrew Bridgen and David Davis on the Brexiteer wing. Steve Baker as well has obviously come out in the past and said that Boris Johnson should go. But you've also got people like Jeremy Hunt, Jesse Norman, maybe more from the moderate wing of the party. So it's a strange coalition. But again, that is very worrying for the Prime Minister. I heard, obviously, one of your previous contributors talking about Remainers trying to get rid of him, but you can't classify Steve Baker or David Davis or Andrew Bridgen as Remainers. So I think that is the real concern for Boris Johnson. The opposition to him is coming from all sides, and they're all coalescing around this idea that he's no longer a vote winner. He's dragging the party down, and if they're going to win the next election, then they have to change leader.
Kevin, I sense that a lot of the public will think this is indulgent, the Tories talking to themselves, having a leadership election now in the middle of a cost of living crisis when a lot of people can't pay their bills. Still a lot of concern, obviously, about war in Ukraine. Do you think that's a danger for the Conservative Party with the broader electorate?
Without a doubt. I mean, it's been proven time and again through history that that divided parties get punished by the electorate. We've got 2 by-elections coming down the tracks in a couple of weeks' time. Conservative-held seats. I wouldn't be surprised if they were to lose both of those. That'll be an opportunity for voters in those seats to cast their verdict on whether they think the Conservatives are getting on with the job of running the country or whether they're fighting amongst themselves. I think it's unavoidable, really, to reach the conclusion. It's been played out on social media now as well. They're absolutely at each other's throats. Number 10 have said this morning that this is an opportunity to draw a line under the matter and move on. There is absolutely no chance of that happening. Regardless of the result tonight, this is going to continue for a long time to come.
Kevin Schofield, thank you for joining us. Thanks for giving us the benefits of your insight. Thank you.
And we'll be talking with more MPs in just a moment here on this special edition of The Briefing with Gloria De Piero and me, Liam Halligan. Stay with us. That's after the GB News headlines with Tamsin Roberts.
Liam, thank you. Good afternoon from the GB Newsroom. It's 12:32. The Prime Minister's anti-corruption czar, John Penrose, has resigned and says Boris Johnson should follow suit. After Partygate and weeks of speculation, the Prime Minister will face a vote of confidence this evening. Dozens of MPs have declared their support for Boris Johnson, although the former Foreign Secretary, Jeremy Hunt, is among those set to vote against him. The secret ballot will be held between 6 and 8 o'clock this evening. Mr Penrose says it's pretty clear the PM broke the rules.
He's broken the ministerial code, and in a serious and material way, and that is historically, traditionally and rightly a resignation matter for him, and it has to be a resignation matter for me too. Integrity, honesty, leadership, those are not technicalities. Those are absolutely non-negotiable things. And actually the Prime Minister says so in his own reply. He says these are absolutely essential as the way we do business in our democracy.
Well, Brexit Opportunities Minister Jacob Rees-Mogg says the public voted for Boris Johnson and MPs shouldn't attempt to overturn that.
Should a small group of MPs overturn the mandate of the British people? And I really think that would be very unwise, and dare I say rather arrogant, because it's assuming that real votes of real people don't matter, and it's all about ultimately overturning the 2016 referendum. So I'm backing Boris. I'm sure he'll do well this evening.
TV, online and DAB plus radio, this is GB News. Now it's back to Gloria and Liam.
We're now crossing live to Westminster, where Conservative MP, former Cabinet Minister David Davis is standing by. David, hi. Very good to see you. So you will be voting. You think Boris Johnson's time is up? Whose time is it?
I've no idea. I mean, frankly, that's secondary. This is an issue about the integrity of the government. For many of my colleagues, it's an issue about themselves getting re-elected, whether Boris can deliver on that. And it's an issue about standing by the rules you passed yourselves, or we passed ourselves, irrespective of whether you think they're good or not. I mean, as you probably know, I think we've been over controlling in some of our actions on COVID. Frankly, all of that doesn't matter if you were willing to obey them yourself. If you're not willing to obey them yourself, you introduce a real problem with the integrity of government.
David, it's clear, and we've said many times here on GB News, this is a broad group of Conservatives from all wings of the party, from Steve Baker on the libertarian right, if you like, all the way through to Jesse Norman on the more moderate side of the party. Are you not concerned, though, as a former Brexit secretary, that this could reopen Brexit? We had Tobias Ellwood, who's the chair of the Defence Select Committee, saying that maybe we can go back into the single market. You've had the likes of Lord Adonis saying if Boris goes, Brexit goes.
Yeah. You know, the day I called on Boris to go in the chamber, then one of my colleagues resigned the whip and went and joined the Labour Party. And my comment on the day was, God save me from my allies. And I think I feel the same, I'm afraid, about what Tobias had to say. It's nothing to do with that. This is about the integrity of the government. This is about getting re-elected as Tories. Frankly, it's about getting back to a low-tax Conservative base. It's about competence in government as well, getting things done. Boris likes to talk about getting the big calls right, but many of my constituents are worried about the small calls that let them get their passport on time, let them get their driving licence on time, let them get their hospital appointment on time. These are all things that we've got to start getting right. At the moment, I'm afraid the outcome of the various investigations have meant this government is paralysed. It can't do its job properly. We need to get back to being a thorough, competent Conservative government. It's not to say Boris hasn't done some good things. He did some good things on vaccines, did some good things on Brexit, he's done some good things on Ukraine. But overall, for the interest of the country as a whole, we need a new Prime Minister.
It would take 100 Conservative MPs to vote against Boris Johnson tonight. It's not going to happen.
Well, we don't know. We'll see. I mean, when I made my intervention, I forecast that this would happen in the autumn. Why did I forecast that? Because I thought by then would be the highest chance of getting a majority to vote the Prime Minister down. The simple truth is that this has happened earlier than I expected. That may or may not lead to an outcome. It may lead to a bigger outcome against him than I'm predicting. But at the moment, I think you're probably right. I think he will probably hang on with 10, 20, 30 votes. And then he's got to make his own decision. And that's a question of character and morality, whether he decides that it's right for the party to stand down in favour of somebody else. That's what he should do.
Nice to have various protesters shouting and screaming behind you, David. If I may, let me just press you a little bit more on who could replace Boris Johnson. You've worked closely with Dominic Raab in the past. Penny Mordaunt's doing a good job today of not tweeting her support for the Prime Minister, tweeting lots about a visit going on in her constituency. Jeremy Hunt seems to be emerging as a front-runner. If it is Jeremy Hunt versus Keir Starmer at the next election, is that enough clear blue water for people on your wing of the Conservative Party?
Well, you say my wing of the Conservative Party. My constituency matters to me before my wing. My country matters to me before my wing. If we've got a government that's delivering on proper public services, is maintaining a good economic environment, in the midst of what you know of all people, Liam, will probably be a stagflation crisis, then yes, they will win. You know, because the public are very, very smart. They're much smarter than we commentators and we representatives allow them sometimes. And the truth is that they know we're going into a difficult circumstance. It'll be more like the 70s than anything we've seen in the last many decades. And somebody has got to cope with that and deal with it effectively. I'm afraid at the moment this government, in toto, is unable to do that. Therefore, if what you've got doesn't work, you try to change. I'll make a decision as to who I want to support when we get a bit closer to the time. When we get to the time, that may not happen this year as this is going.
As ever, David Davis, MP, former Brexit Secretary, joining us there from Westminster.
And very shortly we'll have a Conservative MP who is defending the Prime Minister, another one we've heard from Martin Vickers already today. So we've heard a lot and we'll be hearing lots more from MPs today. But what are the voters making of all of this?
Joining us now in the studio is our polling expert, David Cowling. David, great to have you with us. We know at least 54 Tory MPs have pulled the trigger, if you like. How does this look to the broader electorate, do you think?
Well, I think a number of your earlier contributors have made the point that is well known to all of us, that divided parties are hardly capable of getting lots of public support. People are going through difficult times at the moment. The last thing they need is the impression that the government is actually ignoring that in order to have a sort of an internal scrap. Politicians, political parties are not popular at the best of times, and this just seems like an internal thing. So I think there's a lot of concern in the public that the attention isn't really being focused on the right things. And what I think also is that the public have seen Boris Johnson in the past as somebody whom has stood apart from most politicians. He became Conservative mayor of London that was drifting towards Labour. He pitched beyond the traditional. He was Boris, Boris the character, and people could feel they could empathise with him. They could vote for him in a way that they couldn't. Now he's a ruthless politician. All of his life has shown that, but he gave this impression of being outside that sort of particular box. That's all crumbling now, And I think
he's becoming enmeshed in the party machinery, isn't he?
Yeah, and some, the sordid, as some people might say, details of parties and lying and not rules for me, for thee, not for me. All of that is bringing a tidal wave of recognition of, hang on, were we right?
David, help me sort of make sense of this, because those people who want the Prime Minister to go in the Conservative Party are saying, we want him to go because we want to win the next election. Those Conservative MPs who want him to stay are saying, we want him to stay because we want to win the next election. Which side is right?
Sadly, it can't be both, and I would have an easy answer. I think at the heart of it, so I promise to try and answer your question, but I think at the heart of it is Johnson's problem, that I don't think he has a great tribe of loyal supporters in the party. For lots of Tory MPs, it's transactional. What he did in 2019 was utterly astonishing. He broke records of 100 years old records of winning for a fourth time, getting a big majority, and all the rest of it. Extraordinary.
Then he goes and wins the Hartlepool by-election. Crikey.
Yeah. So all of those people who had resentments against him and disagreements with him in political terms shut up because he was the winner. It's no surprise to me, and I'm sure not to you, that as all of that disintegrates, and as he now appears to be not the great winner, but the loser, the potential loser, all of that is shifting away. So there are people whose recollections is 2019. Yeah. And there are others who are just saying, well, look at what the picture is now, and he's never going to be able to deliver that again.
Interesting. We've got another Conservative MP, one who is defending Boris Johnson, and he is in Westminster for us. He's been busily tweeting this morning his support as the MP for Peterborough, and he joins us now. Hi, Paul. Good to see you.
Hello. Yeah,
Why are you backing the Prime Minister?
Because the Prime Minister only 2.5 years ago won a record majority, well, record in recent times anyway, of 80 seats. He has dealt with some extraordinary challenges. It was only 2.5 years ago we had deadlock as a result of Brexit. He got Brexit done and through. We had this unprecedented challenge of the COVID pandemic. He got jabs in arms. He's made sure that we are one of the most open societies now in the world. And he stood shoulder to shoulder with the Ukrainian people, leading that international response. There are challenges ahead. The cost of living challenge is real. I represent a seat in Peterborough where many people have issues with cost of living, rising energy prices, etc. But I'm confident the Prime Minister is the right person to lead us through this and then lead us on again to a great electoral victory. He's proved time and time again he's a great electoral asset. He's still very popular in places like Peterborough. So let's get on and back the Prime Minister.
You're going to get a pasting on the 23rd of June, aren't you? Certainly in Honiton and Tiverton, down in the West Country.
Well, quite often, we governing parties lose by-elections. That Hartlepool victory was an extraordinary achievement. And remember, that was only a year ago. That was an extraordinary achievement, but really very unprecedented. And so we've got to remember that and the context in which we're in. Actually, in Peterborough, in my constituency, in the local elections, we gained a seat from the Labour Party. So Boris is still popular in certain parts of the country. And I know that if we can get back to an agenda where we focus on growing the economy, we focus on dealing with that COVID NHS backlog, and we make our streets safe, the Prime Minister can go on and we can win the next election. That's the prize at hand for Conservative MPs, and I'm confident he can do it.
So who do you think was booing him at the Jubilee celebrations? What sort of voter? It was clearly a strong reaction.
Well, look, when I've spent the last 4 days going to various Jubilee celebrations in my constituency, there was a great outpouring of celebration for the Queen's Jubilee. And I spoke to scores and scores of local people about the situation. And not one asked me to either send in a letter to the 1922 asking for a vote of no confidence, and not one asked me to vote against the Prime Minister. I'm still confident the Prime Minister is able to reach parts of the electorate that other Conservative leaders haven't, and that's why I'm supporting him today.
Your fellow MPs, Paul, on the government backbenches, that a divided party is unappealing to the broader electorate. People that don't follow politics like all of us here having this conversation?
Yeah, well, I mean, some of our colleagues, they all have their own reasons about why they've submitted letters. I'm not going to engage on blue attacks. They'll have, I say, their own reasons. Some of them have never reconciled themselves to Brexit. Some have never reconciled themselves to the fact that Boris is our Prime Minister. And others, of course, will have their other reasons. And it's their right to do so, because the Conservative Parliamentary Party is a democratic organisation. So they've got a right to do so. But I hope after tonight, and the Prime Minister wins a majority, we can then move on and we can focus again on the people's priorities. And I say that's clearing the elective backlog in our NHS, that's focusing on making our streets safe, and that's growing the economy.
Briefing notes supplied to Rebel MPs. I'm sure you'd have a glance yourself. One figure stuck out to me. 55% of current Conservative voters describe him as untrustworthy. Can you turn that around? Once people have made that view of a politician, is it possible to reverse it?
Forgive me, Gloria, I didn't quite hear all of that. There's a fool behind me shouting for some reason or another. But but you said to me that can he turn that around in terms of getting a popular vote at the next election and regaining trust? I think that's what he said. Look, as I say, I went to my constituency. I live in my constituency. I spent 4 days going to various Jubilee parties, talking to decent, everyday people, and not one of them, Gloria, not one of them told me that I had to send a letter.
Do you not mind about the data, though? Because it's, I understand that, and it's, that must have been lovely for you to have that warm reception in your own constituency. But do you think all the other data's wrong? The ones that are saying that the people don't trust the Prime Minister?
No, look, only a fool would sit there and not listen to people. No, only a fool would sit there and not take stock of what people are telling us. But what that tells me, Gloria, is that we've got to get back onto the front foot. We've got to start talking about the people's priorities. As I say, that's growing the economy, tackling the cost of living crisis, dealing with our NHS backlog, and making our streets safe. That's what the people in Peterborough tell me. And I think, actually, if you looked at some of the polling that you refer to, that's what the wider electorate tell us as well. That's what we need to get back to, and not go down this rabbit hole of turning in on ourselves, infighting, and having this rather self-indulgent episode where we have some sort of leadership contest. We need to focus on our priorities. We've dealt with 3 great challenges over the last 2.5 years in terms of Brexit, the COVID pandemic, and now the war in Ukraine. We can focus on these domestic challenges, and I'm confident Boris is the man to do it.
And Paul, did you hesitate at all before giving the Prime Minister your support? Are you happy with the highest tax burden since the early 1950s? Are you and your constituents happy with emergency measures, a support package, which many people felt took too long to arrive?
Well, I am a low-tax Conservative. I believe instinctively in low taxes, and I believe that the Conservative Party are the low-tax party. But we've had an unprecedented challenge of the COVID pandemic, and we've got the furlough support that was issued out. We have to pay for that, and we've also got a social care challenge. And this is the first government in a generation to grasp the challenge of social care, and we have to pay for it. What I will say is that I was driving this morning. I was taking my girl to school, and I was listening to the radio all about the kind of leadership challenge and what was going to be expected. And I was told on several occasions, Daddy, stop listening to the news, it's so boring. But the second I realised that that vote was on, I pulled over my car to the side of the road, and I immediately sent the tweet that I did, which is expressing the support for the Prime Minister, looking at his track record of Brexit, of COVID, getting those jabs into arms, and of course the war in Ukraine, but also focusing on the new challenges ahead. And Boris has got a lot more to do. Boris has got a lot more to give, and I'm sure he's going to deliver us the victory we need at the next election. We've got to govern, that's absolutely right, but my message to colleagues is that election victory could happen in 2 years' time, and it will happen if we get Boris as our Prime Minister.
Paul Bristow, Peterborough MP, supporting his Prime Minister, supporting Boris Johnson in this imminent Conservative vote of the 1922 committee of all Tory MPs. Thanks a lot for joining us on what's obviously a very busy day for you.
We're talking with Labour MP, Shadow Cabinet member Peter Kyle in just a moment. But first, let's see what the weather's like.
Hello, I'm Aidan McGivern from the Met Office. A lot of cloud for many through the rest of the day, especially England and Wales, but it'll be fine in the north, and for southern parts of the country there will be some showers around. Those showers because an area of low pressure is moving away. It's taking a trailing weather front with it, but leaving a legacy of cloud across much of England and Wales, and some showery outbreaks of rain, particularly through the southern counties of England, along the M4 corridor, for example, up through into South and Mid Wales. There will be some brighter spells to the far south around the English Channel coast. And for Scotland and Northern Ireland, well, that's where the best of the brightness will be, with sunny spells for Western Scotland and highs here of 21 or 22 Celsius. Also feeling warm where the sun comes out in the far south, but there'll be a lot of cloud for central and southern parts of the country. That cloud only slowly thinning and breaking overnight, whilst another area of showery rain pushes into the English Channel coast, affecting the Isle of Wight, Sussex, as well as Kent. Now, elsewhere, mostly dry, but there will be some showers affecting the North Sea coast of northeast England. Clear spells for Scotland, for central and southern parts of England, and a few mist and fog patches around first thing Tuesday. But otherwise, for many, it's a dry and relatively bright start, but cloudy conditions will prevail across southern Scotland, parts of northern England into the Midlands. Some showery rain at first here, and then more widely, sunny spells and showers will affect the southern half of the UK as well as Northern Ireland and Western Scotland by the afternoon. A warmer day to come, though, in the south, 22 Celsius possible, where we get some of those sunny spells. But by the end of the afternoon, further showers are pushing into the far southwest, reaching Northern Ireland as well as parts of Wales during the evening. Clear spells continue towards the east, and then a mixed end to the week. It's going to be showery on Wednesday, and it's going to be increasingly windy on Thursday and Friday.
We are GB News.
We're right across this great nation.
On TV,
on radio, on digital.
Absolutely everywhere.
We don't talk down to you.
We embrace all voices.
with honest and civilised conversation.
We're not part of the establishment.
We're one of you.
And we're only getting started.
Join us on GB News,
the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
Every morning from 6 o'clock, we'll wake you up with GB News Breakfast with all the stories you didn't know from the night before.
So whether it's serious news, entertainment, or your own views from all over our great nation, we're here to kick off your day with a smile.
And the national media should be reflecting and reporting what's happening here.
You will notice the northwestern accents.
Whether you're with us on TV, radio, or online, every morning, it's breakfast from 6 a.m. Hope you can join us.
Join us for Ministry of Offence, the comedy panel show that's just like the news, in that the left fights the right and it doesn't really seem to matter who wins. We cover the big stories. It was in fact a troop of baboons and not angry vegans.
I like that.
And the really important stories.
Fat naked cow gets stuck in swimming pool.
It's a headline in a lot of local newspapers. Yeah.
We're on the same team, Nick. Yeah, but I'm just helping you.
Join us for Ministry of Offence, Saturday nights, 8 o'clock on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton Tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Welcome back. You're watching a special edition of The Briefing here on GB News with Gloria De Piero and me, Liam Halligan, on the day that Boris Johnson faces a vital leadership vote of Tory backbenchers, the 1922 committee, after 1922 Chairman Sir Graham Brady revealed that that threshold of 54 letters of no confidence had been reached. Let's talk again with our polling expert, David Cowling. David, it's interesting, isn't it? We're all assessing here, as are Tory MPs, is Boris Johnson still a winner or not? His supporters, we just heard there from Paul Bristow, MP for Peterborough, very staunchly supporting his Prime Minister, that Boris Johnson is a winner. He just won an 80-seat majority back in 2019. But then he was facing Jeremy Corbyn.
He was, and I think the important thing to remember, nobody denies the scale of the Conservative victory, the achievement and the historical record of doing it. Nobody says that can gainsay that. But we have to look at what was the foundation stones. And if we look at it, we see that in 2019, compared with the previous general election, the Conservative vote went up 1.2%. Labour's dropped 8%. As you rightly said, it was against Jeremy Corbyn. Labour was unpopular. But the only reason for reminding us about that is because it is important. It wasn't 2019. Although the Conservatives scooped the pool and took the prize money, they actually won because Labour's vote collapsed.
Because the Red Wall was upset about Labour's stance on Brexit, right?
Absolutely right. And it's scattered in all different directions.
Done now.
Some of it went to the Tories, some of it went to the Greens. Then, as you say, the issues of Brexit and the rest of it are getting further and more distant, and other issues are taking over. And those were issues that Boris Johnson didn't, in a sense, carry the flag for. And we've now got fairly tough challenges. And he's not up against Jeremy Corbyn either. So there's a whole raft of things which are coming together in a very unpleasant way for him, I think.
You have been witness to lots of our political history. That's
a man as young as me.
Yeah, come on. Can you recall a Prime Minister who has been subject to a vote of no confidence by their MPs, who has gone on to win and fight the next election?
I can't recall any Prime Minister who has, as Johnson has at the moment, got such ratings across the piece. Sometimes you'd have a Prime Minister who was vulnerable on a particular issue, but in others they would do quite well. It's the collapse for Johnson, I think, that's quite startling to me, across the whole raft of things. And it's trust, of course, but it's also on, who's best on the economy, now Labour leading. These are all traditional indicators of how well or otherwise a government is doing. And the Conservatives are behind in a whole raft of them. So there may have been occasions, I can't think of them, but there may have been occasions where some Prime Minister got, near as unpopular for a brief period of time. But this is a collapse across the piece, which makes it all the more difficult, I think, for the Conservatives to look to Boris Johnson to deliver a real recovery.
Worth saying briefly before we move on that John Major, of course, won his vote of no confidence in 95. Then he got whacked in 97, but he was facing the formidable election machine that was New Labour. But we'll come back to that.
Let us go now to the Shadow Cabinet Minister, Peter Kyle. Peter Kyle, who's in Westminster for us, a Labour MP, Shadow Cabinet member. Peter Kyle. Peter, good to see you today. Maybe you are feeling gleeful at the Tory shenanigans, but it could be your party very soon if Durham police find against Keir Starmer, your leader.
I'm not gleeful at all. I think this is a disgraceful moment for our country, and the Tories should never have put us in this position in the first place. Don't forget, this is all of their doing. Boris Johnson, he broke the law during COVID. He's run our public services in a really appalling state. And also, he's the one that's commissioned all these reports into himself. And right at this very moment in time, we find him trying to lower the ministerial code so that if he is found guilty of the latest inquiry, he doesn't have to resign. So this is all of his own making, and I'm certainly not gleeful of it, because people are going hungry right here and now, right across our country. That's what we should be focused on. In terms of Keir, just look at his position on this. He's already said that if he is fined, he will resign. That is principle in action. I don't think he will be fined. I don't think he will have to resign. He can continue to set out the alternative that our country needs for running our public services, tackling crime and getting our economy growing again. Labour Party is united, stands ready and has a plan. The Tory Party is having a nervous breakdown right before our eyes.
Which alternative Tory leader, Peter Kyle, should your party fear most?
Actually, I relish any Tory leader right now, because they are all going to be inheriting the failure of the past. And that's the truth of the situation at the moment. Right now, today, in the last hour, we see Jeremy Hunt and Nadine Dorries attacking each other on Twitter. Nadine Dorries says about Jeremy Hunt that he left our NHS unfit for COVID, ill-prepared for COVID. So these are cabinet ministers attacking each other in public and admitting in public that they left our public services unprepared for the challenges that COVID faced. So this is happening now. So am I scared of whatever leader will come next? No, because every leader that comes next and can conceivably come next will inherit a mantle of failure. And that is something that Labour has the alternative for to solve, a plan that's ready to go, a united party and a leader that's ready to get cracking.
If this party is failing, as you say, you must be really concerned that you're not miles ahead in the opinion polls.
We are miles ahead in the opinion polls. Just look at the one that came out for Wakefield just yesterday that put us 22 points ahead. Let's see how things go. We're not taking anything for granted. But yes, you know, the Labour Party, you have to understand, and I've been very honest about this, at the last whenever you have an election, you don't just press the reset button like it's a video game and you both start from the start line again together. When Keir became leader, the Labour Party was 22 points behind the Tories. Over the years and months that have come since, he has rehabilitated the Labour Party. He's got us fit for office again. We've got new people, new politics, and we have new policies. We are facing the future. We are rooted into the priorities of our country. So yes, we're doing pretty well, and I'm pretty certain that trajectory that we have, reconnecting to the public, will be something that continues into the future as we go towards a general election, which I hope and expect will be sooner than perhaps people were expecting just a couple of weeks ago.
Peter Carr, Labour MP, joining us there from Westminster. Thanks a lot for joining us here on GB News.
Thank you.
Liam and I will be bringing you much more in the next hour, but first, it is your news.
Good afternoon. It's just after 1 o'clock. Here's the latest from the GB newsroom. The Prime Minister's anti-corruption czar, John Penrose, has resigned and said Boris Johnson should follow suit. After Partygate and weeks of speculation, the Prime Minister will face a vote of confidence this evening. Dozens of MPs have declared their support for Boris Johnson, although the former Foreign Secretary, Jeremy Hunt, is among those set to vote against him. The secret ballot will be held between 6 and 8 o'clock this evening. Mr Penrose says it's pretty clear the PM broke the rules.
Broken the ministerial code, and in a serious and material way, and that is historically, traditionally and rightly a resignation matter for him, and it has to be a resignation matter for me too. Integrity, honesty, leadership, those are not technicalities. Those are absolutely non-negotiable things. And actually the Prime Minister says so in his own reply. He says these are absolutely essential as the way we do business in our democracy.
Brexit Opportunities Minister Jacob Rees-Mogg says the public voted for Boris Johnson and MPs shouldn't attempt to overturn that.
Should a small group of MPs overturn the mandate of the British people? And I really think that would be very unwise. And dare I say rather arrogant, because it's assuming that real votes of real people don't matter, and it's all about ultimately overturning the 2016 referendum. So I'm backing Boris. I'm sure he'll do well this evening.
MP David Davis says it's time for a new leader.
This is an issue about the integrity of the government. For many of my colleagues, it's an issue about themselves getting re-elected, whether Boris can deliver on that. And it's an issue about standing by the rules you passed yourselves. We need to get back to being a thorough, competent Conservative government. It's not to say Boris hasn't done some good things. He did some good things on vaccines, did some good things on Brexit, he's done some good things on Ukraine. But overall, for the interest of the country as a whole, we need a new Prime Minister.
Speaking to GB News, Work and Pensions Secretary Therese Coffey says the Prime Minister has her vote.
No, I'm fully supporting the Prime Minister. It's Boris who got the highest share of the vote in 2019 since 1979, got the 80-seat majority, and it's that manifesto and that leadership which got us that majority. Of course, COVID has somewhat derailed things, but even on that, I'd say to you he got the big calls right, and that's why I will certainly be supporting him today and encourage my colleagues to do so.
But Tory MP Andrew Bridgen says Boris Johnson can't be both a rule maker and a rule breaker.
Oh, I think he has got the big calls right with the help of the parliamentary party. But I mean, that doesn't excuse the fact that he's overseen a culture of disregard for his own COVID rules in Number 10. Old adage was, if you're on the front page of the papers for 6 or 7 days in a row, you had to resign. This is going to be 10 months, and it's completely distracting from the government's day-to-day business.
Well, some of the public agree, saying it's time for the Prime Minister to go.
I hope he gets no confidence, because I've got no confidence in him.
I thought that was so telling, actually, that he got booed. I think that was almost like, that felt like a turning point to me, actually.
I just think it's lie after lie, after lie, after lie, after cover up, after change the rules. He's a waste of time.
We're from Australia. Often when they survive the first one, they don't last that much longer beyond that anyway. So you never know.
All right, good luck to him, though.
To other news now, and the UK is sending its first long-range missiles to Ukraine. Boris Johnson confirmed the move in a phone call to President Zelensky, saying the UK can't stand by as Russia flattens cities and kills innocent civilians. It's after air-launched cruise missiles struck rail infrastructure in Kiev for the first time since April. Former Director of Special Forces, Major General Jonathan Shaw, told GB News the UK must continue supplying weapons.
The West needs to take suitable actions to respond to any future strike, and they'll have thought that through. They'll have planned responses if Russia responds in other ways, but then carry on with their plans. We cannot allow ourselves to be intimidated or sort of outfaced by Russian rhetoric.
A British man accused of trying to smuggle artefacts out of Iraq has been sentenced to 15 years in prison. Jim Fitton, a 66-year-old retired geologist, was arrested in March at Baghdad International Airport, carrying small fragments of ancient pottery. His lawyer says he'll appeal the verdict on the grounds that he had no criminal intent. A German man arrested at the same time was acquitted of the same charges. Thousands of British travellers have been left stranded following flight cancellations across Europe. Passengers booked with British Airways, TUI, Wizz Air and EasyJet are all affected as airlines continue to struggle with severe staff shortages. Transport Secretary Grant Shapps says the government will work with the industry to avoid further transport chaos. This is GB News. More from me in half an hour. Now, though, it's back to the briefing with Gloria and Liam.
Hello and welcome to another hour of The Briefing with Gloria De Piero and Liam Halligan.
Prime Minister Boris Johnson faces a vote of no confidence this evening with Tory MPs voting in a secret ballot between 6 and 8 p.m.
This comes after Sir Graham Brady, chair of the 1922 committee which represents backbench MPs, confirmed he had received 54 letters of no confidence in the Prime Minister.
In this next hour, we'll be speaking to politicians and former advisers for their take on this upcoming crucial vote.
And don't forget to send us your views. Boris Johnson, should he stay or should he go? Email gbviews@gbnews.uk or tweet us at gbnews.
Well, joining us now live from Westminster is Scott Benton. He's Conservative MP for Blackpool South, one of those red wall Tory MPs. Scott, by this time, 12:30, 1 o'clock, when Theresa May was facing a vote of no confidence, she'd already amassed, I've just seen it said, 158 Tory MPs in support. So far, Boris Johnson's amassed 82 MPs. Should he be worried?
I don't think he should be worried at all. There's a substantial majority of Conservative colleagues here at Westminster and indeed Conservative voters across the country who are backing Boris. He's a proven winner. He won twice in London against the odds in a Labour-leaning city, and he delivered our party to its largest majority here in Parliament for 30 years. He's a proven winner. He's got a track record of getting the big calls right on Brexit, on the vaccine rollout, on leaving those COVID restrictions and building our economy back up once again. So I will be supporting Boris 100%, and I'll be very surprised if he doesn't deliver a substantial majority of Conservative colleagues this evening.
Why do you think so many of your colleagues don't hold your view?
Well, in any organisation, you're going to get a wide variety of opinions. The Conservative Party is a broad church, and clearly in politics there are people who don't like the leadership of political parties for different reasons. I've been speaking to colleagues this morning. The vast majority of colleagues are behind Boris. They recognise his successes in getting those big calls right I have spoken about. And frankly, in my seat of Blackpool South, I go out knocking on doors every single week. The vast majority of Conservative voters are behind Boris. They want me to back him this evening, and he is the only person, in my opinion, who can keep those red wall seats in the north of England and the Midlands whilst keeping the Conservative coalition in the south together and deliver us an election victory in several years' time. That's why I'm supporting Boris this evening.
You were elected to Blackpool South, as you say. That was in 2019, not so long ago. But I think it's fair to say, Scott, you've appeared on GBNews a lot. You are known for your closeness to your constituents. You're a very assiduous campaigner. So tell me this. How concerned are your constituents about Partygate? Do you think some Tory MPs are over-egging their concern? Do you think the political media class is over-emphasising Partygate?
Well, clearly, the things which have occurred in Downing Street over the course of a pandemic which shouldn't have. Sue Gray has now concluded her report. The police investigation has also finished. Boris promised he would shake up his team in number 10. We've seen that team renewed and reinvigorated. And now I think as a party and indeed as a country, we have to come together and face those challenges ahead. Not just the cost of living crisis, but getting the economy back on track and delivering on levelling up and on public services. That's what people expect us to do, and the vast majority of colleagues will be supporting Boris this evening. A divisive and distracting leadership contest is in absolutely nobody's interest. There's one way we can guarantee a Conservative government at the next election, and that's if colleagues unite behind Boris and get the job done, and that's why I'm supporting him.
2 by-elections coming up in just a couple of weeks, really. You're forecast to lose both of them. Does that not worry you?
Well, people often have short memories. Let's not forget that Margaret Thatcher, probably the greatest leader our party has ever had, suffered a number of disastrous by-election defeats in the 80s. Her personal approval ratings and poll ratings were behind for the vast majority of the time she was Prime Minister, and yet she delivered us to successive general election victories. So I think the Westminster bubble often gets fascinated and situated on particular results, local elections, by-elections, but the general election won't be for another couple of years at all, of course, and vast majority of colleagues know that. We have 2 years to crack on and deliver on the priorities of the British people. Invest in those areas of the country which have traditionally been neglected, including my constituency. Make sure we support families with help with the cost of living, and of course tackle the NHS backlog. There's one person who can do that, and that's Boris Johnson.
The Conservative Parliamentary Party, Scott, has a deserved reputation as a pretty ruthless, power-gaining, power-retaining machine. A lot of your colleagues will be assessing whether or not Boris Johnson is still a winner, as we've been discussing. Yes, he delivered a famous election victory in December 2019, but he was facing Jeremy Corbyn. This time he'll be facing Keir Starmer, if indeed Keir Starmer himself survives that investigation by the Durham Constabulary of Police. But Keir Starmer does not scare Middle England the way Jeremy Corbyn scares Middle England. Doesn't that make a difference?
I think that's true to a large extent. However, let's not forget that Keir Starmer is now 2 years into his tenure as leader of the opposition, and he has worse poll ratings than Ed Miliband, who of course went on to suffer a catastrophic defeat in 2015. So when I speak to my local voters about Keir Starmer, the general feeling is ambivalence. He's had 2 years to make an impression, to get across policies, to excite people and to win the next general election, and he has failed to do that completely. And I think it will be very interesting to see that Durham Constabulary police investigation when that reports, because I think the evidence of what I've seen and what most people have seen suggests that he has broken the law, and both him and Angela Rayner have difficult questions to address in relation to what actually transpired at the so-called Beergate party. So those questions are for Keir to address. My interest is in the Conservative Party in making sure that we can unite colleagues, stay together and deliver that Conservative victory in 2 years' time, which my constituents want to see, because they know we are the only party who can level up Blackpool and deliver the investment in public services local people want to see.
You're doing a great job at defending your party and your leader. Did you wince a bit when you saw some of the people in the crowd at the Jubilee celebrations booing the Prime Minister?
I think it was a mixed response. Obviously, the general feeling in the media was Boris was booed. I was listening to the feed directly. I heard more cheers than I heard boos, to be entirely honest. But of course, this is mid-term of a parliament. People aren't always happy with government at this stage. Vast majority of governments in history have been behind in the polls, just as we are in mid-term. That's why general elections are held every 4 years, because governments have difficult decisions to take, just as we are taking at the moment. But I have every confidence if we get behind Boris, he will deliver. He's a proven winner. He's defied the odds time and time again, not just winning the Brexit referendum in 2016, the London mayoralty twice, and of course the last general election. I think Boris still has a lot of future ahead of him as Prime Minister. That's why I'm supporting him. And I suspect he will win a substantial majority of the parliamentary party this evening as well.
Just briefly, Scott, let's say you're right. Let's say he does win, as you just said, a substantial majority this evening. What is it that you want him to do to consolidate his leadership, to cement his leadership? What are you unhappy about? How is he not delivering for Blackpool South?
I think there are two things. Firstly, all Conservative MPs and councillors and activists in the country have a duty to play to get behind the leader. Divided parties don't win elections. I think we all have a duty to focus on supporting whoever the leader of the Conservative Party is, to make sure we can get across our key messages. I think the government's done a very good job over the last few years against difficult circumstances. No leader in history has had the aftermath of Brexit to negotiate, a COVID pandemic, and then, of course, a war in Europe and the cost of living crisis. So there's an awful lot Boris has had to navigate. Having said that, we've made substantial improvements already, record investment in schools, in hospitals. What I do want to see now are 2 or 3 clear things from the government. I think we have to turbocharge levelling up. We have to see spades in the ground across Blackpool, Bolsover, Scunthorpe, Grimsby, etc. over the next 2 years. We also need to deliver on our promise of stopping small boats. Of course, Priti Patel's done a brilliant job bringing forward the current policy, but that has to work. I have concerns that at the moment it potentially won't. I want the government to make sure that we can successfully deliver that policy. And of course, we also need to help families with the cost of living. I have one of the most deprived constituencies in England. People were delighted with a package of support. £1,200 to some families in my constituency was announced 2 weeks ago. People were delighted to see that. But of course, we do have to be careful and watchful of what happens with the economy and inflation over the next few months, and make sure people have all the support they need to negotiate this difficult 18 months, which is going to be ahead of us.
Conservative MP for Blackpool South there, Scott Benton. Thanks for joining us, Scott. You will be staunchly backing the Prime Minister in this vote this evening.
Cheers, Scott. And now it's a pleasure to welcome Michael Jacobs to the show, Professor of Political Economy at the University of Sheffield, once a senior member of Gordon Brown's staff when he was Prime Minister. Certainly no stranger to high politics and backbench, in fact, in that case, front bench plots. Michael, it's great to see you. I've just got a question that I feel I have to ask you. Take us into the world that you were inhabiting when you were in Number 10, when Gordon Brown was Prime Minister, when members of the Cabinet started to resign. What's it like to be at the centre of things when there is a coup underway?
Well, good afternoon, Gloria and Liam. Well, it's very exciting, particularly if, like me, you're not actually responsible for doing anything about it. I was a policy advisor. I wasn't in the inner circle that was working on the strategy. There's a lot of talking to MPs going on. Basically, what prime ministers in this position have to do is to ensure that all the people that they can are supporting them. And you've heard one backbench Tory MP there. It sounded like he didn't probably need very much talking to by the Prime Minister this morning, but the phones will be buzzing. Every MP who is thought to be wavering will be getting a phone call either from the PM or from one of his aides to possibly promise them a few things, possibly threaten them with a few things, but to make sure that they vote for them. In the end, these things do hang on the individual votes of members of the parliamentary party. And for one reason or another, the various people who might have challenged Gordon Brown never quite got round to it. David Miliband was quite often thought to be in that position. Now we have a vote, obviously, in the Conservative Party, and we don't really know whether your previous speaker is correct and that Boris Johnson will get a substantial majority or not. But this is a moment of definite peril. But for those of us watching just on the outside, it's just good fun.
Michael, I think it's fair to say you are more of a policy animal than a political animal, though, of course, you're no stranger to politics, as we've said. You're obviously coming from a Labour perspective, but just tell us, as an analyst, what policy errors do you think the Tories are making now? Clearly, there's a lot of discontent within his own party that Boris Johnson isn't getting the big policy moves right.
Well, interestingly, I don't think this is about policy at all. I think this is about Boris Johnson's personal integrity. And there was no policy behind this. The policy was that we should all stay in during lockdown and not gather with other people. And it's the Prime Minister's apparently serial breaking of those rules and then lying about it, which is causing the crisis. The statement that you heard on the bulletin there from John Penrose, who's just resigned from a government position, saying that it really wasn't acceptable for a prime minister to disobey the rules and then to mislead Parliament about it and not to take it seriously, as he didn't in his response to his own ethics advisor. That's, I think, the real issue here for the Conservative Party and isn't about policy. Rishi Sunak introduced a rather surprisingly generous package of support for low-income households with a windfall tax, the Labour policy, a couple of weeks ago. That's almost forgotten today. This is really not a question of policy. It's about the personal integrity of the Prime Minister. And that's why it isn't clear to me that even if Boris Johnson wins the vote of no confidence this evening, his government will survive that long because he would remain in place. And those anxieties about his character, I think, are now pretty embedded in the British public. And if the Conservatives lose the two by-elections in a couple of weeks' time, that will raise those questions again, because I suspect people asked on the doorstep and by pollsters, why did you vote against the Conservatives, will bring those things up. I don't think this is going away. And we do have these interesting precedents of the two votes of confidence taken in Theresa May in 2018 and in Margaret Thatcher in 1990. She won, both of those women won both of those no confidence votes, but then resigned a little bit later because they had really lost the confidence of their parliamentary party and of their voters. So that seems to me to be the really interesting question now.
The Prime Minister's defenders say that the next election won't be won or lost on the basis of the Sue Gray report. It's a fair point, isn't it?
I don't think it'll be won or lost on one issue. I think the Prime Minister's character and his moral integrity will be an issue. But we've got two very difficult years running up to what we presume is the date of the next election, which is, I would imagine, in about 2 years' time, summer of 2024. And those will be very difficult times for the government, whoever is leading it. So even if the Conservatives change their leader, we have a cost of living crisis, which is going to get worse again in the autumn when energy prices rise, inflation likely to stay high for a year. That means that people's incomes in real terms, once inflation is taken into account, are falling. So people will be really feeling that squeeze. And despite the help that the government provided to some households a few weeks ago, there will be some households that, as we've been hearing in lots and lots of reports, are really struggling to feed their families, to heat their homes and so on. So that's a very difficult economic context. Brexit is still causing tremendous problems for businesses. We've got an economy that is not investing. Productivity is still low. So you don't see much of an economic pickup occurring in the next 2 years. And the big promise which Boris Johnson made, which was, apart from Brexit, to level up the country, mentioned again by the MP there for Blackpool South, is very unlikely to show any results in the next 2 years. The Chancellor, Rishi Sunak, had an opportunity when the white paper on levelling up was published a few months ago to put some real money into this, and he didn't. And therefore, I think it's very unlikely that places like Blackpool South, the constituency of the MP who you just had on there, and other places in the so-called Red Wall, Midlands and North, will really see much of a difference. And if Boris Johnson goes into the next election, or another Conservative leader, unable to show what he'd really done with the 5 years that they've been in government, I think they will struggle.
Michael Jacobs, Professor of Political Economy at the University of Sheffield, and a former advisor to then Prime Minister Gordon Brown. You're an On the Money regular. It's great to have you on this special edition of the briefing, which On the Money is given way for, given that the Prime Minister faces this vote of no confidence.
Don't go anywhere. Next on the briefing with me and Liam, we'll be hearing from Helen Thomas, former advisor to George Osborne, for her take on today's vote.
We are GB News.
We're right across this great nation.
On TV,
on radio, on digital.
Absolutely everywhere.
We don't talk down to you.
We embrace all voices.
with honest and civilised conversation.
We're not part of the establishment.
We're one of you.
And we're only getting started.
Join us on GB News,
the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
Every morning from 6 o'clock, we'll wake you up with GB News Breakfast with all the stories you didn't know from the night before.
So whether it's serious news, entertainment, or your own views from all over our great nation, we're here to kick off your day with a smile.
The national media should be reflecting and reporting what's happening here.
You will notice the northwestern accents.
Whether you're with us on TV, radio, or online, every morning, it's breakfast from 6 a.m. Hope you can join us.
Join us for Ministry of Offence, the comedy panel show that's just like the news, in that the left fights the right and it doesn't really seem to matter who wins. We cover the big stories. It was in fact a troop of baboons and not angry vegans.
I like that.
And the really important stories.
Fat naked cow gets stuck in swimming pool.
It's a headline in a lot of local newspapers. Yeah.
We're on the same team, Nick. Yeah, but I'm just helping you.
Join us for Ministry of Offence, Saturday nights, 8 o'clock on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Welcome back. You're watching The Briefing with me, Gloria De Piero, and Liam Halligan. As a confidence vote looms for Boris Johnson this evening, we're assessing the mood and the likely outcome of that vote, which could see the Prime Minister immediately go into a leadership contest.
Helen Thomas joins us now, also no stranger to high politics. Helen used to advise Conservative George Osborne, former Chancellor of the Exchequer, and as regular viewers know, she is now, of course, CEO of Blonde Money. Helen, great to have you with us on the show as ever. You are a financial person, very much so. Interesting, before we get into the politics, that the FTSE, the stocks and shares in London, they quite like this leadership contest. The pound quite likes this leadership contest. It seems that the markets, they want a kind of political purging, some clarity going forward.
Yeah, we love that expression, don't we, that markets hate uncertainty. It's a little bit surprising, though, because after this vote, if Boris doesn't win, then we get plunged into a leadership contest, which goes on for several rounds in Parliament, potentially, till they whittle it down to the two that face the membership. And then you have several weeks for the members to vote. If, of course, they can't actually just settle down on one leader. But I think this is because, from what I'm hearing, the betting markets are strongly on the odds are expecting Boris to win this. I'm hearing something like 82% is the latest betting that Boris will win.
And you're good at crunching numbers. You're also good at sensing the mood in the Conservative Party. What do you think? Do you think it's people say he's going to win and it will be fine, but it's the number, it's the majority, it's the certainty by which that vote is won by. What's your instinct, Helen?
Well, we are indeed crunching the numbers. We have our own spreadsheet that we've been looking at for some time, and it does not look that clear for Boris Johnson. Of course, just because somebody comes out and says they're backing him, it's a secret ballot. They go in, it is just their conscience and that piece of paper. No one will ever know how they actually voted. And of course, they can always say, of course, I supported you, Prime Minister. So in some respects, of course, even while we're totting up what appear to be these pronouncements, it doesn't mean that that's the case. Now, having said all of that, it does at the moment look around a 50-50 kind of a bet. So I would say that current betting is actually a little bit too optimistic for Boris Johnson. And I would pick up on your point, Gloria. Let's say he does just about win it. We all know he will consider that a mandate to carry on. But Theresa May won by a much larger margin, and within 6 months, she was gone. John Major won, and within 2 years, he was replaced in a huge landslide for, of course, Tony Blair. So, look, he's not out of the woods. I think financial markets are woefully underestimating that there is a lot more uncertainty ahead.
I'd agree with you, Helen. Of course, you specialise in talking to financial markets about politics and trying to help them understand the labyrinthine processes and procedures at Westminster. What are you telling your clients now without giving away too many trade secrets? Just that the markets are being too optimistic about this?
Well, of course, Liam, I keep that for my top clients. But as I know you both so well, I'm very happy to share with you. Really, just look at it this way, right? Political campaigns are won by momentum. And the momentum has been against Boris Johnson. We have seen a drip of opposition to him. That's public opposition. And some of it, of course, some of these people who are saying they're very unhappy, they haven't actually said, oh, I've put in a letter, but they have said they're very unhappy with what happened. They were waiting for Sue Gray's report. They've just been back to their constituency for 10 days. Yes, there's been a wonderful Jubilee celebration, but they will be hearing from constituents who, frankly, yeah, they are worried about other things, but they haven't forgotten about this. Frankly, they've made their minds up, and by the sounds of what we see in the polling, they're sick of it. So here's what I would just say as a cautionary tale. If you want to win, and Boris should know he has been a winner, but his opponents are coming from every side of the party, different intakes. It's when you have different angles coming at you, it's extremely hard to oppose it. If you think about Theresa May, she had one issue and one group. And even then, 6 months later, she was gone. This is a whole different set of individuals who are all hearing the same thing from their constituents. We keep getting the same message in the polling. Frankly, the momentum itself would seem to suggest there is actually still a mountain for Boris to climb. But we know he's a betting man. He'll take the gamble. For him, he'd take the gamble if it were, 10% chance. He obviously thinks, he's got the skills to sell it. But goodness me, what a day it is going to be in Westminster.
Helen Thomas, former advisor to George Osborne, CEO of Blonde Money, and most importantly, On the Money regular. Thanks for joining us, Helen.
Fascinating insights. You are watching or listening to The Briefing with me, Gloria De Piero.
And me, Liam Halligan. After the break, we'll be talking to Baroness Kate Hoey, getting her thoughts on the Prime Minister's imminent vote of confidence.
First, it's the GB News with Tamsin Roberts.
Gloria, thank you. Good afternoon from the GB Newsroom. It's 1:35. The Prime Minister's anti-corruption czar, John Penrose, has resigned and says Boris Johnson should follow suit. After Partygate and weeks of speculation, the Prime Minister will face a vote of confidence this evening. Dozens of MPs have declared their support for Boris Johnson, although the former Foreign Secretary Jeremy Hunt is among those set to vote against him. The secret ballot will be held between 6 and 8 o'clock this evening. Mr Penrose says it's pretty clear the Prime Minister broke the rules.
He's broken the ministerial code. And in a serious and material way, and that is historically, traditionally and rightly a resignation matter for him, and it has to be a resignation matter for me too. Integrity, honesty, leadership, those are not technicalities. Those are absolutely non-negotiable things. And actually the Prime Minister says so in his own reply. He says these are absolutely essential as the way we do business in our democracy.
In other news, Boris Johnson has spoken to Ukraine's President Volodymyr Zelensky, confirming the UK will deliver long-range missiles. It's after Russian air-launched cruise missiles hit rail infrastructure in Kiev for the first time since April. Retired British geologist Jim Fitton, accused of trying to smuggle artefacts out of Iraq, has been sentenced to 15 years. The 66-year-old was arrested in March at Baghdad International Airport, carrying small fragments of ancient pottery. His lawyer says he'll appeal the verdict on the grounds that he had no criminal intent. Thousands of British travellers have been left stranded following flight cancellations across Europe as airlines continue to struggle with severe staff shortages. Transport Secretary Grant Shapps says the government will work with the industry to avoid further transport chaos. This is GB News on TV, online and DAB+ radio.
Direct Bullion sponsors the Finance Report on GB News for gold and silver investment.
Here's a quick snapshot of today's markets. The pound is 1.256 to the dollar and 1.171 to the euro. And the price of gold currently stands at £1,477.08 per ounce.
Direct Bullion sponsors the Finance Report on GB News for physical investment.
We are GB News.
We're right across this great nation.
On TV,
On radio, on digital.
Absolutely everywhere. We don't talk down to you.
We embrace all voices.
with honest and civilised conversation.
We're not part of the establishment.
We're one of you.
And we're only getting started.
Join us on GB News,
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Every morning from 6 o'clock, we'll wake you up with GB News Breakfast with all the stories you didn't know from the night before.
So whether it's serious news, entertainment, or your own views from all over our great nation, we're here to kick off your day with a smile.
The national media should be reflecting and reporting what's happening here.
You will notice the northwestern accents.
Whether you're with us on TV, radio, or online, every morning, it's breakfast from 6 a.m. Hope you can join us.
Join us for Ministry of Offence, the comedy panel show that's just like the news, in that the left fights the right and it doesn't really seem to matter who wins. We cover the big stories. It was in fact a troop of baboons and not angry vegans.
I like that.
And the really important stories.
Fat naked cow gets stuck in swimming pool.
It's a headline in a lot of local newspapers. Yeah.
We're on the same team, Nick. Yeah, but I'm just helping you.
Join us for Ministry of Offence, Saturday nights, 8 o'clock on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Welcome back. You're watching The Briefing with me, Gloria De Piero.
And me, Liam Halligan. It's a pleasure to welcome Baroness Kate Hoey onto the show, former Labour MP, of course, and an independent peer in the House of Lords. Kate, you famously worked with Boris Johnson during the Brexit referendum. How do you think he's going to fare tonight?
Well, I also worked with him, of course, when he was Mayor of London as his sports commissioner. And the thing about Boris is that when he's under attack and when he's got his back to the wall, that's usually when he really shows his mettle. So I think while it's obviously very upsetting for him to actually have to go through this vote of confidence tonight, if he manages to get through it with a pretty good majority, then I think he has an opportunity to come out of it. Nothing then can happen for a year. And he really then needs to be listening to his real friends. I think some of whom are probably not around him in the cabinet. And I think he needs to be listening to them and making all sorts of changes. But if I was a Conservative MP, I would not be voting to have, at this time of all times, to have a whole series of votes and problems, which will only divide the party even more and make it more difficult for those MPs who are worried about their seats.
You were in Parliament for a long time on the Labour benches, but you will have seen lots of leadership coups in your time in Parliament on both sides of the House. Does this strike you as having parallels with any other that you witnessed?
Well, I think the problem is once this happens, once there is actually the numbers of MPs who put letters in, then sometimes that can build a momentum and that can make it that it's almost becomes, to most leaders, then the fact that, their day is up. It may not be up immediately, but it will eventually come. I mean, again, Boris may well be, the Prime Minister may well be one of those who will buck that trend. I mean, we saw long lingering complaints about Ed Miliband, for example, how long that took. All of these things have a kind of life of their own, which eventually, something cracks. Now, I'm interested that there are people from what I would say is who were Brexiteers who are supporting this tonight, because I still personally feel that behind a lot of this is actually a belief that somehow if you get rid of Boris, who delivered us leaving the European Union, that will be the beginning of the start of trying to go back. The kind of thing that Lord Adonis tweeted today about if Boris goes, Brexit goes in time. And I think that's worrying. And I think some of those Brexit MPs perhaps are the ones who didn't quite get the job they'd hoped. That you can't rule out, Gloria, as you know, sort of people's personal feelings about how they've been treated in government and how that affects their vote at the end of the day as well.
You genuinely believe, Kate, as an ardent Brexiteer yourself, you genuinely believe that if Boris goes, then Brexit will be back in play? You genuinely believe that the UK could go back into the single market, go back to free movement with the European Union? Is that politically feasible?
No, I think what it will do, Liam, is continue a sort of running sore debate that's been there, particularly being pushed by elements in the media and some of the ardent Remainers. But what I do think, genuinely, if Boris goes, I don't think we'll find anyone as strong who wants to actually sort the protocol out. And if the protocol goes, of course, that rules out the kind of way that some people have been hoping that the protocol would allow the rest of the United Kingdom to come back into those elements of the single market that Northern Ireland has been left in, the customs union. And so for me, as someone who cares deeply about what's happening to Northern Ireland, I see Boris as one of the very few people who understands what went wrong, why he did it, why he signed up to the protocol, and why it has to go. So that's why I feel worried if he was to be damaged irretrievably, that it actually would affect the legislation, which we need someone with courage to put that legislation through and not be swayed by the people who will go on about breaking international agreements. The United Kingdom has to come first.
When parties embark on a civil war, it's really turbulent for the MPs involved. There's quite a lot of trauma involved when there's colleague against colleague. I just want to draw on your experience of being witness to that over your many years of parliamentary experience. It's not nice, and it can get nasty, can't it?
No, it's not nice, because we've got to remember MPs are humans after all. Sometimes I think the public forget that. So they've got their own feelings and their own concerns, and weighing up all the time that balance between what they personally feel, what they know their constituents feel, what their party's saying, and what would be good for their particular party. So Labour MPs will be weighing up, is this really going to help us? Getting rid of Boris, I expect a lot of them will think that, particularly up where they might be wanting to stand in red wall seats or fighting areas where Brexit was very popular. But yes, you're right. It's not emotionally, it takes quite a lot out of people, and they are having to discover that perhaps their best friend has a different view than they have. So none of this is easy. The media love it, of course. I'm not sure the public does. And I think actually at the end of the day, a Conservative MP who votes tonight against the Prime Minister, leading to all sorts of, well, we know not what in the next few months, is damaging not just their party, but actually the country at this time.
Just while we've got you, Kate, if I may, obviously Boris has had his difficulties with Partygate, an understatement, but also Keir Starmer's got his difficulties. He's being investigated by the Durham Constabulary of Police. If that goes against the Labour Prime Minister, if he steps down, what happens on the Labour front bench? Who do you think will and should take over as Labour leader?
Well, unfortunately, the two people who I would want to have seen become leader, neither of them are in Parliament. One is Caroline Flint, who I think would have been a wonderful leader, and the other is Andy Burnham, who I think is still in there with a shout. I certainly know who I don't want, but perhaps that might be more tactful not to say that.
Tactful and Kate Hoey in the same sentence.
Oh, Kate, I hope you tell me privately. I'm intrigued now.
Yes.
Kate Hoey, Baroness Kate Hoey, former MP for Vauxhall, now an independent peer. Always great to talk to you. Thanks so much for joining us here on GB News.
Thank you.
We're delighted to welcome Matthew Shattuck now. He's head of politics at the betting exchange markets. Matthew, great to get the insights of a proper punter like yourself. Where's the smart money on this outcome? Boris, is he going to survive?
Well, Liam, yeah, I mean, I think at the moment the betting market is expecting him to win this vote tonight. Right now, we're giving him around a 75% chance of winning. That's based on the latest odds at Smarkets. Now, I think one of your previous guests said that at one stage today that number had got up to 82% chance he'd win. Well, within the last hour, there's started to be a bit of opposition to Boris's chances. So a bit more uncertainty. Probably he's going to win, but this is by no means certain.
Tell us about your methodology. Why should we take seriously where the money is put, if you like?
Well, you know, people who are prepared to put their money down on these sorts of things have real sort of skin in the game, not like every pundit that's out there. And political betting has got a pretty good record of calling elections and by-elections correctly. Back when Theresa May faced a vote of no confidence, during that day, the betting market became very certain that she would win that. She did eventually win it quite easily. So, yeah, I mean, I think there's good reason to think that Johnson should be favourite here to get through this. But the odds we've got on the actual number of MPs who are going to vote against him, well, at the moment, the midpoint there is around 140. That's what the betting market expects. And they need 180 to win, so they're still a fair bit short based on that.
I think it's very interesting. It's fascinating. You often do get political insiders, genuine insiders, putting their money on the markets. I do think that betting markets, the prices they give are as near as we can get to perfect information, though still, as Gloria's intimated, they can be wrong. So if the midpoint is 140 votes against Matthew, that's still a pretty small majority. It's a 40 majority. He would be seriously wounded.
Well, if it's 140 vote against, they'll actually end up being around about an 80 majority. So that would, I suppose, be seen as being just about enough to dispel any doubts for the time being. Although even if it's that sort of number, I think some of the sort of anti-Johnson forces will think, well, perhaps we should have tried to organise this and wait for another couple of weeks, because we've got two very interesting by-elections coming up, both of which the betting markets expect the Tories to lose. Wakefield seems certain, based on some polling we've seen as well. And the Tiverton and Honiton by-election, well, right now the markets odds are giving the Liberal Democrats about an 80% chance of overturning a very big majority and winning that. So that would have piled even more pressure on Johnson. But as I say, 25% chance of him losing still. By no means certain he's going to get through this.
But so you think he will still win according to the betting? But you suggested in an earlier answer that there had been some movement against him. Is that right? Just explain it for us again.
Yeah, about an hour ago, had we spoken, Gloria, we'd have said Johnson had about an 82% chance of winning. As I speak, looking at the live odds at Smarkets, that's down to about 74%. So that represents quite a lot of money going on Johnson to lose his vote in the last hour. That may have had something to do with some of the news about John Penrose resigning. There are many people right now trying to scroll through Twitter and find out, what every Tory MP has been saying. And there are lots of Tory MPs who haven't declared what they're going to do. And I think a lot of people are expecting that the balance of people who are undecided, or at least undeclared, may actually be people who are tempted to vote against the Prime Minister tonight. So, yeah, this is very much still up in the air.
Matthew, it's worth saying also you are a betting exchange. The odds that you're quoting there are the outcomes of weights of money in the market. You're not a bookmaker that are making up odds based on your information. But really interested to talk to you. Matthew Shattuck there, Head of Politics at the betting exchange Smarkets.
And we are joined still, as we will throughout the afternoon, by our polling guru, David Cowling. Have you heard anything? You've been listening to all our exchanges with political figures over the last hour or so. Have you heard anything to make you change your view on anything?
No, I think what's become clear, and in a sense it's almost reflecting the latest betting, I suspect the markets have been watching this programme, is that actually some very persuasive voices, it seems to me, listening to you interrogate them and the rest, have made me think that this is going to be narrower than I had thought. And I think it comes back to that question that Liam, in a way, was hinting at. And that's been underpinning a lot of what's been said, which is, OK, so you win, but does winning mean you've won? Because the examples, historic examples of Thatcher, when she stood in her first round, she had a significant vote. It wasn't enough, but she withdrew. Theresa May withdrew, even though she had a bigger set. So I think we're going to very quickly come up against Boris Johnson's instinct for survival versus actually whether the damage is going to be he's going to be hull below the waterline, and the party is going to be seriously jeopardised by a Prime Minister who may have won, but narrowly, where everybody who walks away from it afterwards, when all the bunting comes down, thinks Christmas. This is a party that is never going to be reconciled.
I think a lot of this could hinge, and ordinary voters and the outside world will be astonished, but I think a lot of this will hinge on the arcane, almost unwritten laws of the 1922 committee. Are you allowed to hold another vote within a year of a vote of no confidence or not? We're told the rules say once you've had your vote, that's it for a year, to engender some kind of stability. But we're hearing from political insiders, and indeed Matthew there from Smarkets, that they're almost assuming there could be another vote of no confidence.
Well, it's remarkable how things can change quickly. I mean, the 1922 committee's rules are not, part of the they're
not laws of the land, are they? Yeah.
They're not part of some, right of human rights legislation. So they can be changed. And if there is pressure, it'll just be another sign that it's hemorrhaging slowly, but it's bleeding away. And I think that must be the nightmare for the Conservatives, that they get into a situation where he stays and they are really suffering over a period of time.
David Cowling, always great to have your insights with us there. Our polling expert, David Cowling, here in the GB News studio.
Let's bring in your views now on the vote of confidence due to happen this evening. Peter says Boris Johnson must stay and win the next general election. Otherwise, we'll get a slimy lawyer running the country. What did you have in mind?
Frank says the Prime Minister has a long history of being unable to tell the truth. The Conservative Party knew this when they chose him as leader, but the public didn't. Partygate has exposed his true character.
Diane says it's very poor that disgruntled MPs are forcing this vote today. Never has there been such a popular Prime Minister. Boris is Boris, but he has delivered on all the major happenings since he was voted into office. Give him a chance to do more. Thank you for all your emails.
Indeed, and thank you for watching and listening to The Briefing with Gloria De Piero and me, Liam Halligan, here on GB News TV, DAB+, digital radio and online.
Don't go anywhere, as Liam will be with Alex Phillips in the next hour, and then I will be with Alex Phillips the hour after that. All that, but first, it is time for your weather.
Hello, I'm Aidan McGiven from the Met Office. A lot of cloud for many through the rest of the day, especially England and Wales, but it'll be fine in the north, and for southern parts of the country there will be some showers around. Those showers because an area of low pressure is moving away. It's taking a trailing weather front with it, but leaving a legacy of cloud across much of England and Wales, and some showery outbreaks of rain, particularly through the southern counties of England, along the M4 corridor, for example, up through into South and Mid Wales. There will be some brighter spells to the far south around the English Channel coast. And for Scotland and Northern Ireland, well, that's where the best of the brightness will be, with sunny spells for Western Scotland and highs here of 21 or 22 Celsius. Also feeling warm where the sun comes out in the far south, but there'll be a lot of cloud for central and southern parts of the country. That cloud only slowly thinning and breaking overnight, whilst another area of showery rain pushes into the English Channel coast, affecting the Isle of Wight, Sussex, as well as Kent. Now, elsewhere, mostly dry, but there will be some showers affecting the North Sea coast of northeast England. Clear spells for Scotland, for central and southern parts of England, and a few mist and fog patches around first thing Tuesday. But otherwise, for many, it's a dry and relatively bright start, but cloudy conditions will prevail across southern Scotland, parts of northern England into the Midlands. Some showery rain at first here, and then more widely, sunny spells and showers will affect the southern half of the UK, as well as Northern Ireland and Western Scotland by the afternoon. A warmer day to come, though, in the south, 22 Celsius possible, where we get some of those sunny spells. But by the end of the afternoon, further showers are pushing into the far southwest, reaching Northern Ireland as well as parts of Wales during the evening. Clear spells continue towards the east, and then